8 weeks into the war, the Valtharan Empire faced its first existential crisis in 800 years. War Chancellor Vorthak sat in his private quarters aboard the flagship Dominion, staring at reports that made no sense according to everything he had learned about governance and conquest. 3 member species had formally requested meetings to discuss their status in the Empire. That was diplomatic language for potential rebellion. 7 conquered worlds had reduced their tribute payments, claiming economic difficulties. Productivity was down across 43 star systems. Most disturbing of all, his own officers were asking questions about the morality of their mission. The human war had become a galactic disaster, but not in any way the Valtharans had anticipated. On Earth, Colonel Jae Sung was implementing the most unusual military strategy in human history. His forces controlled nothing more than a few underground bunkers beneath the ruins of New Tokyo. But he was broadcasting continuously to every corner of the galaxy. Day 56 of the occupation, he said into his communication device. The aliens control our cities, but they can't control our minds. Every day they spend more resources guarding us than they gain from conquering us. Every day we prove that some victories are more expensive than defeats. His broadcasts were being monitored, not just by other human forces, but by conquered species throughout the Valtharan Empire. The message was spreading. Resistance was possible even after conquest. In the underground tunnels beneath New Tokyo, 10 million humans were conducting an experiment in passive resistance. They followed alien orders but slowly. They worked at alien facilities but inefficiently. They answered alien questions but unhelpfully. "How long can you maintain this resistance?" asked the Valtharan governor of the city, a tall being with pale green skin and 6 arms. "Forever," replied Dr. Minho, the elected representative of the human population. "This isn't an organized resistance that you can break by capturing leaders. Every human here has individually decided that cooperation with your empire is optional. We can force compliance through punishment." "You can kill us," Dr. Minho agreed, "but then you'll have a dead city instead of a productive one. Either way, you lose." The Valtharan governor found himself in an impossible position. Ruling through fear required the threat of something worse than the current situation. But humans had already proven they preferred death to slavery. The usual tools of oppression were useless against people who welcomed martyrdom. Similar situations were developing across human-occupied space. Every alien administrator faced the same problem. How do you govern people who refuse to be governed? Meanwhile, Intelligence Officer Minji had been analyzing alien communications from her hiding place on the captured research station Discovery. What she found confirmed humanity's darkest suspicions about their enemy. "Admiral," she transmitted to Kyung-ho, "the Valtharan Empire is economically dependent on conquest. They don't just want to rule other species, they need to. Their entire civilization is built on extracting resources and labor from conquered worlds." "What happens if conquest becomes unprofitable?" Kyung-ho asked. "Their empire collapses. They can't sustain their technology and population without constant expansion." This information changed everything about human strategy. They weren't just fighting for their own freedom, they were threatening the economic foundation of galactic civilization. Kyung-ho shared this intelligence with the remaining human commanders. "We're not trying to win a war anymore," he told them. "We're trying to crash an economy." The new strategy was devastatingly simple. Make every human territory as expensive as possible to control. Every captured facility was sabotaged to require constant maintenance. Every human worker produced just enough to avoid punishment, but never enough to be profitable. Every interaction between humans and aliens created problems that required alien resources to solve. Engineer Wu Jin had been perfecting this approach from his cell in a Valtharan prison ship. Despite being captured, he continued his work by teaching other human prisoners how to be the most expensive slaves in galactic history. "The trick is to be helpful," he explained to his fellow prisoners. "Always try to do what they ask, but try very, very badly." Human prisoners across the Empire began implementing this strategy. They volunteered for work assignments, then needed constant supervision. They offered suggestions for improving efficiency, but all their ideas made things worse. They asked thoughtful questions about alien technology that revealed nothing useful, but wasted enormous amounts of time. The psychological impact on Valtharan forces was severe. They had conquered hundreds of species, but none had ever actively tried to be useless. Most conquered populations either fought back or cooperated fully. Humans had invented a third option: cooperative resistance. War Chancellor Vorthak received daily reports about the deteriorating situation throughout his empire. The human strategy was spreading to other conquered species, who were beginning to understand that passive resistance could be more effective than violent rebellion. "Sir," his aide reported, "the Calorian homeworld has announced they're reinterpreting their surrender treaty. They claim they agreed to be conquered, not enslaved." "What's the difference?" Vorthak asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "They're willing to acknowledge Veltheran authority, but they want to negotiate the terms of their participation in the empire." This was unprecedented. No conquered species had ever demanded negotiations after surrender. The very concept challenged the foundation of imperial authority. "How many ships would we need to force full compliance?" "At least 30, sir. For one system." Vorthak calculated the mathematics of empire in his head. 30 ships to control one system. 40% of his fleet tied up fighting humans, growing rebellions on dozens of worlds. The numbers no longer worked. Dr. So Young, now serving as Earth's unofficial ambassador to the galaxy, was broadcasting from a hidden facility in the Australian outback. Her message was specifically directed at conquered species throughout the empire. "You don't have to fight," she said. "You don't have to die. You just have to decide that freedom is worth some inconvenience. Make conquest expensive. Make occupation difficult. Make your conquerors question whether ruling you is worth the effort." Her broadcasts were being translated into hundreds of languages and retransmitted across the galaxy. The response was immediate and dramatic. Species that had been model subjects for centuries began implementing human-style resistance. The Andromedans started arriving late for work assignments. The Centaurians began asking endless questions about regulations they had followed without question for decades. The crystalline Vorthaxi began communicating in their ancient language instead of the imperial standard, forcing their administrators to hire translators. None of these actions were rebellious enough to justify military intervention, but together they created a cascade of administrative problems that paralyzed imperial governance. Admiral Kyung-ho was coordinating this galactic resistance from his command post on New Seoul Station when he received an impossible communication. It was from War Chancellor Vorthak himself. "Admiral Kyung-ho," the alien's mechanical voice said through the translation system, "I wish to discuss terms." "Terms for what?" Kyung-ho replied. "Terms for ending this conflict." Kyung-ho almost laughed. "You mean terms for our surrender?" "No," Vorthak said after a long pause. "Terms for our withdrawal." The silence on the communication channel stretched for several minutes. In 800 years of galactic history, the Veltharan Empire had never withdrawn from a conquest. They had never negotiated with a species they were in the process of conquering. They had never admitted that a military victory could be a strategic defeat. "What do you want from us?" Kyung-ho asked. "I want you to stop," Vorthak replied. "Stop broadcasting to our territories. Stop teaching other species to resist. Stop spreading the idea that conquest can be defeated through non-cooperation. And in exchange, we leave your system. We acknowledge human independence. We never return." Kyung-ho considered the offer. It was everything humanity had fought for, but he sensed there was more at stake than just human freedom. "What about the other species you've conquered?" he asked. "That is not part of these negotiations." "Then there are no negotiations," Kyung-ho said firmly. "We didn't fight just for ourselves. We fought to prove that empire itself is a bad idea. Either you free everyone or we continue showing the galaxy that your empire is built on a lie." The communication ended in silence. War Chancellor Vorthak sat in his command chair, facing the most difficult decision in Veltheran history. He could continue fighting a war that was destroying his empire from within, or he could admit that some species could not be conquered. Either choice would end the empire as it had existed for 8 centuries. The humans had achieved something no military force in galactic history had accomplished. They had made conquest itself obsolete. The war had reached its breaking point, but the real battle was just beginning. The fight was no longer about human survival. It was about the future of freedom in the galaxy. 6 weeks into the war, Intelligence Officer Minji accomplished what should have been impossible. She infiltrated a Veltheran command ship by hiding in the wreckage of a destroyed human vessel. The aliens, confident in their superiority, had grown careless about security. They didn't expect humans to be clever enough for espionage. Minji spent 3 days observing alien operations from inside the ship's ventilation system. What she discovered changed everything humanity thought they knew about their enemy. The Valtheran Empire wasn't held together by military might alone. It was held together by the myth of inevitable victory. For 800 years, no species had ever successfully resisted conquest. This perfect record was what kept the Empire's member species loyal and prevented rebellions. But now that myth was cracking. Minji watched alien officers argue in their command center. Through her translation device, she could hear the strain in their voices. The Calorian rebellion is spreading to 3 more systems, one officer reported. They're demanding independence. Zephyrians have stopped answering our communications. Entirely, said another. And the humans continue to resist despite losing 70% of their territory. The ship's captain, a tall alien with 4 arms and silver skin, looked exhausted. How many ships do we need to maintain control of human space? Currently, sir, 40% of our total fleet. But that number is growing as they implement new resistance tactics. Minji nearly gasped. 40% of the galaxy's most powerful military was tied up fighting humanity's tiny fleet. The humans weren't just fighting. For Earth, they were crippling the Empire's ability to maintain control anywhere else. She managed to access their communication systems and discovered something even more important. The aliens were afraid, not of human weapons or technology, but of human ideas. They were quarantining human broadcasts and forbidding their own people from listening to human transmissions. The human infection spreads through communication, she heard one officer say. They're teaching our subjects that resistance is possible. Minji recorded everything she could, then made her escape by sabotaging the ship's navigation system. As alarms blared throughout the vessel, she ejected herself in a stolen escape pod and transmitted her findings to Admiral Kyung-ho. The Admiral read her report with growing amazement. They're more afraid of our ideas than our weapons, he said to Captain Haijin. What does that mean for our strategy, sir? Kyung-ho smiled for the first time since the war began. It means we stop trying to win battles and start trying to win minds. He activated the fleet-wide communication system. All human forces, this is Admiral Kyung-ho. We're implementing Operation Martyr. Every battle from now on is also a broadcast. Show the galaxy what it means to choose death over slavery. The new strategy was radical even by human standards. Instead of fighting to preserve their forces, human commanders began fighting to create the most inspiring defeats possible. Every last stand became a performance designed to be broadcast across the galaxy. Commander Wu Jin led the defense of the Europa mining station with this new philosophy. When Valtheran forces surrounded the station, he opened communication channels to every conquered world in the Empire. My name is Wu Jin, he said, as alien ships began their final attack. I'm about to die fighting for humanity's freedom. I want you to know that I chose this. No one forced me to fight. No one ordered me to die. I'm doing this because some things are more important than survival. The battle lasted 6 hours. Wu Jin's small force was completely destroyed, but their final transmission reached millions of beings across the galaxy, on 17 different worlds. Productivity stopped as workers gathered around communication devices to listen to humans die for their freedom. Dr. So Young had been studying the psychological impact of these broadcasts from her laboratory on the research station Discovery. Her analysis revealed something extraordinary about human behavior. We're the only species in the galaxy that finds meaning in meaningless sacrifice, she reported to Earth Command. Every other intelligent race evolved past their self-destructive instincts. We kept them, along with something else, the ability to inspire others through our suffering. Her research showed that human resistance was having effects far beyond military strategy. Conquered species were beginning to remember what they had lost when they surrendered. Some were starting to wonder if survival was really worth the price they had paid. The aliens conquered them by offering a rational choice, So Young explained. Submit or die. Every species chose submission because it was logical. But we're showing them there's a third option. Die with meaning. War Chancellor Vorthak was receiving increasingly desperate reports from across his empire. The human war was draining resources faster than conquest could replace them. Worse, the rebellion was spreading to species that had been peaceful subjects for centuries. Sir, his aide reported, The Andromedans are refusing to send workers to the new military shipyards. They say they want to negotiate new terms. Send a fleet to remind them of their obligations. We can't, sir. All available ships are either fighting humans or suppressing rebellions elsewhere. Vorthak realized he was facing an impossible situation. To maintain control of human space, he needed most of his fleet. But maintaining control of human space left him unable to control the rest of his empire. The humans had created a strategic paradox that had no solution. Meanwhile, the human resistance was evolving in ways that defied military logic. Colonel Jae-sung, defending the last human stronghold on Mars, received an order that would have been unthinkable at the start of the war. "Colonel, you're ordered to surrender the base," Admiral Kyung-ho told him. "Sir, surrender it, but don't give up. Show them what occupying human territory actually costs." Jae-sung understood immediately. The humans would become a conquered population that refused to be conquered. They would follow orders just slowly enough to be useless. They would obey regulations just incorrectly enough to cause problems. They would be the most expensive slaves in galactic history. When Veltharan forces took the Mars base, they inherited 10,000 humans who treated occupation as a temporary inconvenience. Every alien patrol faced harassment from civilians. Every alien facility suffered mysterious accidents. The humans didn't fight back directly. They simply refused to function as a conquered people. Aliens found themselves spending more resources on controlling human civilians than they had spent fighting human soldiers. Every human city became a resource drain. Every human worker produced less than they consumed. The occupation was bankrupting the empire. "They're making conquest economically impossible," Dr. So Young observed. "Even if they lose militarily, they win economically." The most disturbing reports came from the Valtharan Psychological Warfare Division. Human prisoners were somehow converting their guards to question the Empire's methods, not through force or argument but through example. "They accept torture without breaking," one report stated. "They face execution with calm dignity. They treat their captors with pity rather than hatred. This behavior is affecting our personnel in ways we cannot predict or control." War Chancellor Vorthak read these reports with growing unease. His empire was designed to fight enemies who wanted to survive. Against enemies who embraced death, his entire military doctrine was useless. The final straw came when his own crews began asking questions. Veltharan soldiers who had never questioned orders were suddenly wondering why they were fighting beings who posed no threat to anyone except themselves. "Sir," his fleet captain reported, "morale is declining across all units. The troops don't understand why we're fighting enemies who welcome death." "Because they threaten the stability of the Empire," Vorthak replied. "But sir, they're not threatening us with weapons. They're threatening us with ideas." Vorthak paused. In his 3 centuries of service, no subordinate had ever questioned the nature of their enemies. The human infection was spreading even to his own people. Engineer Wu Jin, broadcasting from the ruins of Europa Station, delivered what would become the war's most famous transmission. "You came here to expand your empire. Instead, you've learned that some things can't be conquered, only destroyed. The question is, are you conquerors or exterminators?" That question echoed across the galaxy, forcing every member of the Valtharan Empire to confront an uncomfortable truth. They had built their civilization on the assumption that all intelligent beings valued survival above freedom. Humans had proven that assumption wrong, and in doing so they had exposed the moral emptiness at the heart of galactic civilization. The war was no longer about human survival. It had become about the survival of the very concept of empire itself. 3 weeks into the war, War Chancellor Vorthak faced something he had never encountered in 3 centuries of conquest, an enemy that fought harder when losing. His tactical officers presented daily reports that made no sense according to standard military doctrine. "Sir, the humans have abandoned their main defensive line around Mars," reported his chief strategist. "But they've left behind over 2,000 booby traps and delayed action explosives." "Why would they mine territory they're abandoning?" Vorthak asked. "Unknown, sir. They appear to be making every meter of space dangerous for us to occupy." Vorthak studied the holographic display showing human positions throughout the solar system. Red markers indicated areas under Veltharan control, but each red zone required constant patrols and defensive measures. Instead of gaining territory, his empire was inheriting problems. Meanwhile, Private Tejo found himself captured during the Battle of Mars Station. The young soldier had volunteered for what everyone knew was a suicide mission to delay the alien advance. When Veltharan forces finally overran the station, they found him alone in the control room, badly wounded but still alive. The alien interrogation chamber was a sterile white room that hurt Teho's eyes. His captors were tall, thin beings with pale blue skin and large black eyes. They spoke through translation devices that made their voices sound mechanical. "Why do humans choose death over surrender?" the lead interrogator asked. Teho laughed, which seemed to confuse the aliens. "You really don't understand, do you? Explain." "You think this is about winning and losing," Teho said. "But for us, it's about something else. It's about proving that some things can't be conquered, only destroyed." The interrogator's large eyes blinked slowly. "That is irrational. Destroyed things have no value." "Exactly," Teho replied. "That's why you can't win. Every human you kill becomes worthless to you. Every position you capture costs more than it's worth. We're not fighting to win. We're fighting to make winning meaningless." The aliens exchanged glances in their strange way. Teho could see that his words were disturbing them. These beings had built an empire on the assumption that all intelligent species valued survival above everything else. Humans were proving that assumption wrong. "Your species is infected with madness," the interrogator concluded. "Maybe," Teho agreed. "But it's our madness and you can't cure it." That night, Teho escaped by pretending to have a seizure. While the aliens tried to help him, thinking he was dying from his injuries, he managed to access their ship's environmental controls. He couldn't destroy the ship, but he could make life very uncomfortable for everyone aboard. Back on Earth, engineer Wu Jin was working on a completely different approach to the war. Instead of building weapons to win battles, he was designing what he called persistence weapons, devices that wouldn't defeat the aliens but would make them regret every victory. "The idea is simple," he explained to his team in an underground facility beneath Seoul. "We can't match their technology, but we can make our technology annoying." His latest creation was a computer virus that infected alien systems slowly, causing minor malfunctions that got worse over time. Weapons that aimed slightly wrong, life support systems that produced unpleasant odors, communication equipment that randomly played human music. "It won't win the war," Wu Jin admitted. "But imagine trying to run an empire when every captured human facility drives you crazy." The virus was already spreading through alien networks, carried by captured human equipment. Veltharan technicians were reporting strange problems throughout their fleet. Nothing dangerous, just endlessly irritating. Admiral Kyung-ho watched these developments from his command post on New Seoul Station. The human strategy was working, but not in any way that military textbooks would recognize. Instead of defeating the enemy, they were making the enemy defeat themselves. "Sir," Captain Hyojin reported, "we're intercepting alien communications. They're having trouble with their conquered territories." "What kind of trouble?" "Other species are asking questions. They want to know why humans are choosing death over slavery. Some of them are starting to wonder what would happen if they made the same choice." This was the development Kyung-ho had been hoping for. The human resistance wasn't just about Earth. It was about every world the Veltharan Empire had conquered. If other species began to resist, the Empire would face rebellions across hundreds of star systems. Commander Young-soo was defending the asteroid belt mining colonies when he received word that his position was about to be overrun. Instead of attempting a hopeless evacuation, he sent a message that would be broadcast throughout alien space. "To any species listening to this transmission," he said as enemy ships surrounded his tiny outpost, "remember what you're seeing here. We're not dying because we have to. We're dying because we choose to. That choice is available to everyone." The aliens captured the mining station, but Young-soo's message had already spread beyond human space. It was being repeated on worlds the Veltharan Empire had conquered decades ago. Species that had accepted slavery were suddenly remembering what freedom felt like. War Chancellor Vorthak found himself dealing with the first rebellion in his empire's history. The Calorians, a species conquered 50 years earlier, had stopped following orders. They weren't fighting back exactly, but they were no longer cooperating. "Sir," his aide reported, "the Calorian homeworld is refusing to send tribute ships. They say they want to reconsider their position in the Empire. Send a battle fleet to remind them of their obligations," Vorthak ordered. "Yes, sir. But we'll need to withdraw ships from the human front to do it." Vorthak paused. The humans had forced him to spread his forces thin across multiple fronts. Every human position he captured required ongoing resources to maintain. Now other conquered species were causing problems. The empire that had grown through easy conquests was suddenly expensive to maintain. Dr. So-Young was analyzing captured alien technology when she made a disturbing discovery. The Valtharan Empire wasn't just militarily powerful. It was economically dependent on conquest. They needed the resources and labor from conquered worlds to maintain their fleet and support their population. They're not conquerors, she realized. They're parasites. She shared her findings with Admiral Kyung-ho. If we can make conquest unprofitable, their entire empire becomes unsustainable. How do we do that? We've already started. Every human position costs them more to capture and hold than it produces. If other species follow our example, the mathematics of empire stop working. The psychological impact of human resistance was spreading faster than Valtharan forces could contain it. Species across the galaxy were receiving human broadcasts and asking themselves questions they had never considered. What if they had fought back? What if they chose death over slavery? What if saying no was still an option? On the bridge of his flagship, War Chancellor Vorthak stared at reports from across his empire. Productivity was down on 17 conquered worlds. 3 species had stopped paying tribute. Rebellion was spreading like a disease, and the cure seemed to be more expensive than the problem. The humans were losing every battle, but somehow they were winning the war. They had introduced something into galactic civilization that the Valtharan Empire couldn't fight. The idea that some things were worse than death. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving another human broadcast." "What do they want now?" "They're not talking to us, sir. They're talking to our conquered territories." The message was simple, delivered by a wounded human soldier from a burning space station. "We're showing them that no is still an option. Remember that when they come to your world next." Vorthak realized with growing horror that the humans weren't just defending their own freedom. They were attacking the very concept of empire itself. And that attack was working. The war was entering a new phase, one that no military strategist had ever planned for. A conflict where losing battles could win the peace, and where death could be more powerful than victory. The countdown reached 0 at exactly 12 Samhain p.m. Earth Standard Time. War Chancellor Vorthak sat in his command chair aboard the flagship Dominion, expecting the usual surrender transmission. In 847 previous conquests, the pattern had never varied. First came panic, then desperate attempts at negotiation, and finally submission. Instead, his communication officer looked confused. "Sir, we're receiving multiple transmissions from Earth." "Put the surrender message on the main screen," Vorthak ordered. "That's the problem, sir. None of them are surrender messages." The main screen flickered to life, showing a split view of dozens of different human leaders. Presidents, prime ministers, military commanders, and even ordinary citizens were all saying the same thing in different languages. No, not "we need more time" or "let us negotiate." Just no. Vorthak's 4 hands tightened on his chair arms. "This is impossible. Show me their military response." The screen changed to display human space forces. The tiny Earth fleet was powering up weapons and moving into attack formation. Their ships looked like toys compared to Valtharan vessels, but they were clearly preparing to fight. "Sir," said his tactical officer, "their actions don't match any known behavioral pattern. They must understand they cannot win." "Of course they understand," Vorthak replied. "No species is that primitive. They're trying to negotiate from a position of strength. Begin the demonstration." He opened a channel to Luna Base, humanity's largest off-world settlement. "This is War Chancellor Vorthak. You have forced us to demonstrate our power. Surrender now, and no more of your settlements will be destroyed." The response came from Commander Dong-Wu, a middle-aged human with graying hair and tired eyes. "War Chancellor, we understand your message perfectly. We just don't care." Vorthak stared at the screen. In his 3 centuries of military service, no species had ever said they didn't care about survival. "You cannot be serious. We will destroy your entire base." Dongwu nodded calmly. "We know, but we've decided that some things are worse than dying. Being slaves is one of them." "This is madness," Vorthak said. "Your species will go extinct." "Maybe," Dongwu replied. "But we'll go extinct as humans, not as your pets." The communication ended. Vorthak sat in stunned silence for a moment, then gave the order. Destroy Luna Base. The attack lasted 30 seconds. The Valtheran energy weapons turned the human settlement into glowing vapor. 3,000 humans died instantly. It should have been a clear message to the rest of humanity about the cost of resistance. Instead, something unexpected happened. Human communication networks exploded with activity. But it wasn't panic or calls for surrender. It was rage. Captain Hyojin watched the destruction of Luna Base from the bridge of New Sol Station. Around her, the crew stood in shocked silence. Then someone started speaking in a low, angry voice. Others joined in. Soon the entire bridge was filled with quiet, deadly conversation. Sir, she said to Admiral Kyung-ho, we're receiving reports from Earth. The President is asking for immediate military response. And what do our forces want to do? Kyung-ho asked. They want to attack, sir. All of them. Even though we can't win, Kyung-ho nodded slowly. He had expected this reaction. Humans had always been strange about lost causes. They built monuments to last stands and hopeless battles. They told stories about heroes who died fighting impossible odds. Other species might find this behavior irrational, but it was deeply human. Very well, he said. Signal all ships. Begin Operation Defiance. Dr. So-young was working in her laboratory aboard the research station Discovery when the orders came through. As a xenobiologist, she had been studying fragments of alien technology that had drifted too close to human space in previous years. The aliens' energy weapons and shield systems were decades ahead of anything humans had developed. But she had noticed something interesting. The Valtheran technology was perfectly designed for fighting rational opponents. Their shields assumed enemies would try to preserve their own ships. Their weapons were calibrated to disable rather than destroy, because captured ships had value. They've never fought someone who doesn't care about survival, she muttered to herself. She opened a communication channel to Admiral Kyung-ho. Sir, I have an idea. It's insane, but it might work. At this point, Dr. So-young, insane ideas are all we have left. What if we don't try to win battles? What if we try to make winning meaningless for them? Across the solar system, human forces began implementing tactics that no military academy had ever taught. Ships loaded with nuclear warheads accelerated directly toward alien vessels, making no attempt to survive the attack. The alien shields could stop the explosions, but they couldn't stop the psychological impact. Commander Taeho led the first suicide attack from the Mars defense platform. As his small ship raced toward a massive Valtheran cruiser, he broadcast a message that would be repeated throughout the war. We choose this. Remember that we choose this. The nuclear explosion barely scratched the alien ship's shields, but something changed in the Valtheran fleet. Their communications filled with confused chatter. Officers reported to their superiors that the humans were acting incorrectly. War Chancellor Vorthak found himself facing a completely new kind of warfare. His enemies were attacking without regard for their own survival. They were turning every battle into a mutual destruction scenario. When his forces captured human positions, they found them rigged with explosives and booby traps. Sir, his intelligence officer reported, we've intercepted human communications. They're not trying to win this war. They're trying to make us regret starting it. Vorthak studied the tactical displays. His fleet was winning every engagement, but each victory cost more resources than it gained. Worse, his own crews were beginning to show signs of stress. Fighting enemies who welcomed death was affecting Valtheran morale. What do the psychological profiles say about human behavior? He asked. That's the problem, sir. Their behavior doesn't match any known psychological profile. They appear to be genuinely preferring death to submission. On Earth, the governments were coordinating the most unusual military strategy in history. Instead of trying to save human lives, they were trying to spend them as expensively as possible. Every human soldier was instructed to make their death cost the aliens something valuable. President Kim Min-ho addressed the world from a bunker in Seoul. We may not be able to defeat them, he said, but we can make them understand that conquering humanity will be the worst decision they ever made. The message resonated across human space. Soldiers who would never have volunteered for suicide missions began lining up for assignments that had no chance of survival. Engineers started designing weapons that only worked once but caused maximum damage. Civilians began preparing their cities for sieges that would make occupation impossible. Admiral Kyung-ho received a communication from Earth Command. Admiral, The aliens are requesting negotiations, he almost laughed. Negotiations? After 72 hours? Yes, sir. They want to discuss terms for human surrender. Kyung-ho looked out at the alien fleet. Several ships showed damage from suicide attacks. Their perfect formation had broken up as they tried to defend against enemies who didn't defend themselves. Tell them we'll negotiate, he said, but our terms haven't changed. They leave, or we all die trying to make them leave. The human response to superior force was spreading throughout the solar system like a virus. Instead of rational fear, there was irrational determination. Instead of logical surrender, there was illogical defiance. And somewhere in the depths of space, other conquered species were monitoring human communications and asking themselves a question they had never considered before. What if we had said no? Admiral Kyung-ho stood on the bridge of the orbital station New Seoul, watching the impossible sight through the main viewing window. Alien ships filled the space around Earth like a swarm of angry metal insects. Each ship was 3 times larger than Earth's biggest space station. Their dark surfaces reflected no light, making them look like holes torn in space itself. "Sir, we're getting reports from every major city," said Captain Hae-jin, her voice tight with stress. "The alien ships are blocking out the sun over New York, London, Tokyo, and Seoul. People are panicking in the streets." Kyung-ho nodded slowly. He had seen many battles in his 30 years of military service, but nothing had prepared him for this. Earth's entire space defense force consisted of 12 small warships and a handful of orbital stations. The alien fleet had over 300 massive vessels. "Any word from Earth Command?" he asked. "There's still an emergency session," Hae-jin replied. "The president is trying to contact other world leaders, but communication is difficult with those ships interfering with our satellites." A new sound filled the bridge, a low, humming noise that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The lights flickered and suddenly a massive holographic image appeared in the center of the room. The creature in the image was tall and thin with pale blue skin and 4 arms. Its eyes were large and completely black. "Greetings, humans of Earth," the alien said. Its voice was cold and mechanical, coming through hidden speakers. "I am War Chancellor Vorthak of the Valtheran Empire. We have come to offer you a choice." Kyung-ho stepped forward even though he knew the alien couldn't see him. Around the bridge, his crew stood frozen, staring at the hologram. "Your species is young and primitive," Vorthak continued. "You fight with simple weapons and travel in slow ships. We have conquered 847 worlds. Each one chose wisely when faced with our power." The hologram changed, showing images of different alien cities. Beautiful crystal towers reached toward purple skies. Strange creatures that looked like walking trees tended to gardens filled with glowing plants. Underwater cities housed beings that looked like giant jellyfish. "These species now live in peace under our protection," Vorthak said. "They contribute their knowledge to our empire and share in our prosperity. They are happy." The images changed again. Now they showed destruction. Cities burning, oceans boiling, entire planets cracking apart like broken eggs. "This is what happens to species that choose unwisely." The War Chancellor's voice grew colder. "We do not enjoy destruction, but we will not permit defiance." Kyung-ho felt his hands clench into fists. Behind him he heard someone whisper a prayer in Korean. "You have 72 hours to surrender," Vorthak announced. "Your leaders must announce complete submission to Valtheran authority. Your military forces must power down their weapons. Your people must prepare for peaceful integration into our empire." The hologram flickered and changed one final time, showing a countdown timer floating in the air. The numbers glowed red: 1:59:58, 71:59:57, 71:59:56. "If you do not surrender in 72 hours, we will demonstrate our power by destroying one of your settlements. After that demonstration, you will have 24 more hours to reconsider. If you still refuse, we will begin systematic elimination of your species." The hologram disappeared, leaving the bridge in shocked silence. Captain Hae-jin was the first to speak. "Sir, what are our orders?" Kyung-ho stared out at the alien fleet. Each ship could probably destroy New Seoul Station with a single shot. Earth's weapons would barely scratch their hulls. By every measure that mattered, humanity had already lost this war before it began. "Get me a direct line to Admiral Park on Earth," he said quietly, "and patch me through to every human ship and station in the system." While Hae-jin worked at her console, Kyung-ho thought about his daughter Mi-young, who lived in Busan with her 2 children. He thought about his elderly parents in their small apartment overlooking the Han River. He thought about every human being on Earth, going about their daily lives while alien warships hung over their heads like swords. "Sir, you're connected to the fleet," Hyejin reported. "Earth Command is also on the line." Kyung-ho activated his communicator. "This is Admiral Kyung-ho to all human forces. You've all seen what we're facing. Command wants our assessment of the situation." Voices crackled through the speakers from ships scattered across the solar system. Captain Dongwu from Luna Base, Commander Taeho from the Mars Station, Lieutenant So-young from the asteroid mining platforms, all of them reporting the same thing. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and completely surrounded. "What's the tactical recommendation?" asked Admiral Park from Earth. Kyung-ho closed his eyes for a moment. In all his years of military service, he had never faced a situation where surrender was the only logical choice. The aliens were right. Humanity's weapons were primitive compared to theirs. Resistance would mean the extinction of the human race. But something deep in his chest rebelled against that logic. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was something uniquely human that the aliens, for all their advanced technology, couldn't understand. "Admiral Park," he said slowly. "With respect, sir, tactical recommendations assume we're trying to win. But what if winning isn't the point?" There was silence on the communication channel. Then Admiral Park's voice came through, uncertain. "Explain." "They've conquered 847 worlds," Kyung-ho said. "Every single one surrendered when faced with superior force. It was the logical choice. But humans, we've never been entirely logical, have we?" He paused, looking out at the alien fleet again. "Maybe that's our advantage. Maybe that's the only thing they can't plan for." "Admiral," Captain Hyejin said quietly, "the countdown is at 71 hours and 53 minutes. Kyung-ho nodded. "Patch me through to every communication satellite still working. I want to talk to Earth." A few minutes later, his voice was being broadcast to every television, radio, and internet connection on the planet. "Citizens of Earth," he began, "we face a choice. We can surrender and live as subjects of an alien empire, or we can fight and probably die as free humans. The logical choice is obvious." He paused, watching the alien ships through the window. "But since when have humans ever been logical?" The Great Hall of the Galactic Council floated in the darkness of space, a massive structure of crystal and light that orbited a dying star. Inside, hundreds of beings from across the galaxy gathered in their designated sections. Some floated in tanks of liquid. Others sat on cushions of anti-gravity. A few existed as pure energy, their forms flickering like candles in the dark. Ambassador Veltrin of the Gelnari Collective stood in the center of the chamber. Her species was tall and thin, with skin that shimmered like pearl. Her large eyes held no pupils, just swirling colors that changed with her emotions. Right now, those eyes were dark purple, the color of deep fear. "Honored Council," she said, her voice carrying through the translation devices that let all species understand each other. "My people are dying. We have come to beg for your help." The council members shifted uncomfortably. They all knew why the Gelnari had come. Everyone had heard the reports. "The Kreshkar swarm has entered our space," Veltrin continued. Her voice shook slightly. "They have already consumed 2 of our colony worlds. Every living thing on those planets is gone, eaten, processed into fuel for their bioships. Over 3 billion souls vanished in mere cycles." A hologram appeared above the chamber floor. It showed a planet that had once been green and blue, covered in cities and forests. Now it was brown and dead, the surface stripped down to bare rock. Massive insect-like ships swarmed around it like flies on a corpse. "The swarm is now attacking our homeworld, Valora Prime," Veltrin said. "We have 2.3 billion people there. We have 3 cycles before our defenses fail. Maybe less." The council chamber filled with concerned murmurs and clicking sounds. The Rathani delegation, beings made of living crystal, chimed sadly. The Vexer representatives, who looked like floating jellyfish, pulsed with distressed colors. High Chancellor Mordan, a being that resembled a large slug with multiple eye stalks, raised one appendage for silence. His species, the Torthine, had led the council for 10,000 years. "Ambassador Veltrin," Mordan said slowly, "we understand your pain. We truly do. But the Kreshkar swarm is... They are not an enemy that can be fought with conventional means. They number in the billions. They feel no fear. They cannot be reasoned with. They exist only to consume. Then you will not help us? Veltrin's voice cracked. You will let my entire species die? It is not that we will not help, said Counselor Zexatari, a being made of geometric shapes that constantly rearrange themselves. It is that we cannot. Look at our fleets, Ambassador. We have ships built for exploration, for transport, for scientific research. Our weapons are designed to disable, not destroy. Our entire civilization has spent 50,000 years moving beyond violence. Moving beyond violence, Veltrin repeated bitterly. How wonderful for you! My people never pursued violence either. We are telepaths. We share thoughts and feelings. We build gardens and create art. And now we are being torn apart and eaten while the galaxy's greatest civilization tells us they have moved beyond helping us. The council chamber fell silent. The truth of her words hung in the air like a weight. There must be someone, Veltrin said desperately. Anyone, a species with weapons, with warships, with soldiers who can fight. The Kreshkar have destroyed every military species they have encountered, Mordon said. The Vraxis clans were warriors bred for battle. The swarm consumed them in 12 cycles. The Korthan Empire had weapons that could crack planets. They lasted 18 cycles. What makes you think anyone can stop them now? Veltrin was silent for a long moment. Her colors shifted through purple, then red, then to something close to black. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet. What about the Deathworlders? The entire council chamber erupted in shocked sounds. Clicking, humming, whistling, and electronic screeches filled the air. Absolutely not. Mordon's eye stalks all focused on her at once. You cannot be serious, Ambassador. I am completely serious, Veltrin said. The humans. From the planet they call Earth. You have studied them. You quarantined their entire system because you were afraid of them. With good reason. Counselor Zextari's shape spun rapidly. Do you know what kind of world they come from? Their planet is classified as a Class 12 death world. The gravity alone would crush most of our species. The diseases on that planet have killed billions of them throughout their history. Their oceans are filled with creatures that can eat them whole. Their weather systems regularly spawn storms that destroy entire cities. And yet they survived, Veltrin said. Not just survived, added another counselor, a being of smoke and light named Whisper Through Void. They thrived. They became the apex predator on a planet full of apex predators. Every single species on their world that could threaten them, they either killed, domesticated, or learned to avoid. They are persistence hunters. Do you understand what that means? It means they chase their prey until it collapses from exhaustion. It means they never give up. Veltrin said softly. It means they are dangerous, Mordan insisted. Their entire history is violence. War after war after war. They have weapons designed specifically to kill each other. Nuclear bombs, biological agents, chemical weapons. They have destroyed their own population centers in their conflicts. We quarantined them not to protect us from them, but to protect them from themselves. And yet, Veltrin said, in the 18 months since first contact, they have not attacked anyone. They have not invaded anyone. They have asked repeatedly to join the council as partners. They have offered to share their technology. They have sent ambassadors who speak of peace and cooperation. Pretty words, Zextari said dismissively, but we have seen their entertainment media. Their stories glorify violence. They celebrate warriors and battles. They have a phrase, war is hell. They know how terrible it is, and yet they keep doing it. Maybe, Veltrin said, her colors brightening to something like hope. Maybe that is because they know how to do it. Maybe that is what we need right now. The chamber fell silent again. The council members looked at each other through various sensory organs. The humans have warships, Veltrin continued. Real warships. We have seen them in our intelligence reports. Ships designed for combat. Weapons meant to destroy. Soldiers trained to fight. Everything we spent 50,000 years evolving beyond. They have perfected. If we contact them, Mordon said slowly, if we ask them to come and fight for us, we are admitting that all our philosophy, all our evolution toward peace was wrong. We are saying that violence has a place in civilized society. No, Veltrin said. We are saying that when innocent people are being slaughtered, doing nothing is worse than doing something. We are saying that survival matters, that life matters, that my children, and my children's children, deserve a chance to exist. She looked around the chamber at all the gathered species. Send the message. she said. Please, if you have any compassion at all, send the message to Earth. Beg the Death Worlders for help. Because in 3 cycles my species will cease to exist, and the galaxy will have one less voice crying out for peace. High Chancellor Mordan was quiet for a very long time. His eye stalks drooped, a sign of sadness in his species. Very well, he said finally. Transmit the distress call to the Sol system. Mark it urgent, Council priority, and may the old stars have mercy on us all for what we are about to unleash. The message was sent at faster-than-light speeds, crossing the vast distance between the Council chambers and the small yellow star that humans called the Sun. It carried coordinates, tactical information, and a simple plea. Help us. In the Council chamber, Veltrin stood alone and waited. She did not know if the humans would answer. She did not know if they would care about aliens they had never met. She only knew that they were her last hope. 3 cycles until her homeworld fell. The countdown had begun. Admiral Catherine Morrison was drinking coffee when the message arrived. It was real coffee, grown in the orbital farms above Earth, not the synthetic stuff they served on most ships. She believed good coffee helped people make good decisions. She would need to make a lot of decisions today. Admiral, incoming transmission, her aide said, stepping into her office at the United Earth Defense Command headquarters. It is from the Galactic Council. Priority urgent. Catherine set down her cup. In the 18 months since humanity had made contact with alien life, they had received exactly 7 messages from the Council. 6 of them were warnings to stay in their own system. 1 was a catalog of rules humanity needed to follow if they wanted to be considered civilized. This was the first time the Council had marked anything urgent. Play it, she said. The holographic display activated. A tall, shimmering alien appeared, her colors swirling with what the translation software marked as extreme distress. I am Ambassador Veltrin of the Gelnari Collective, the alien said. We are under attack by the Kreshkar swarm. 2 of our worlds have fallen. Our homeworld will be destroyed in 3 standard cycles. The Galactic Council cannot help us. We have nowhere else to turn. If any humans are listening to this message, we beg you, please help us. We are a peaceful people. We have children, families. We do not want to die, please. The message ended. The holographic alien vanished, leaving only coordinates and tactical data hanging in the air. Catherine stared at the empty space where the alien had been. She thought about those words. We have children, families. We do not want to die. She picked up her phone. Get me the Earth Assembly. Emergency session. And activate the expeditionary fleet. We have work to do. 3 hours later, Catherine stood before the representatives of Earth's unified government. The assembly chamber was filled with leaders from every nation on the planet. On the screens behind her, she showed them the alien's message and the tactical data. The Kreshkar swarm is a hive mind species, she explained. They consume organic material to fuel their growth. They have destroyed dozens of civilizations. Their bioships number in the millions. They cannot be reasoned with or negotiated with. They exist only to eat and reproduce. And the Galactic Council? Asked Ambassador Chen, Earth's representative. What are they doing? Nothing, Catherine said bluntly. Their ships are built for science and exploration. They have no weapons worth mentioning. They have no soldiers. They spent 50,000 years evolving beyond violence. That philosophy works great until someone violent shows up. Why should we help them? Asked Representative Kowalski from the European zone. They quarantined us, called us dangerous, treated us like animals who might bite. Because it is the right thing to do, Catherine said simply. There are 2.3 billion people on that planet who are going to die if nobody helps them. They did not ask to be attacked. They did not do anything wrong. They are just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And because, added General Okonkwo, head of the Mars Defense Force, if we do nothing, we tell the galaxy exactly what kind of species we are. We tell them that humans only care about humans. That we will watch innocent people die and do nothing. The assembly chamber was quiet for a moment. I have another reason, Catherine said. The Kreshkar swarm is consuming everything in its path. Right now, they are 200 light years from Earth. If they finish with the Gelnari, they will keep moving. Keep eating. Eventually, they will find us. I would rather fight them 200 light years away than in our own solar system. How long do we have? Asked Representative Amadi from the African Union. 3 cycles. About 6 Earth days. If we leave immediately, we can get there with maybe 6 hours to spare. What do you need? Ambassador Chen asked. Everything, Catherine said. The vote was unanimous. Earth would answer the call. Catherine returned to the orbital shipyards above Earth where the Terran Expeditionary Fleet was stationed. These were not exploration vessels. These were warships, built during the Mars Rebellion when the colonies tried to break away from Earth. They were designed for one purpose: to fight and win. The fleet consisted of 47 ships. At the center was the UED's Indomitable, a carrier battleship that served as the flagship. It was a massive vessel, 3 kilometers long, covered in armor plating and bristling with weapons. Around it were the heavy cruisers, destroyers, and frigates that would form the battle group. The ships looked nothing like the elegant alien vessels humanity had seen. Those were smooth and curved, made of exotic materials that shimmered in the light. Human ships were angular and brutal. They looked like flying fortresses made of metal and violence. Catherine walked through the hangar bay of the Indomitable, watching the crews prepare for departure. Pilots checked their fighters. Marines loaded equipment. Engineers ran final tests on the weapon systems. She found Sergeant Marcus Chen in the Marine section drilling his squad. He was a veteran of the Jupiter mining conflicts, where corporations had fought each other for control of the gas giants' moons. He had sharp eyes and scars on his face from a plasma burn. "Sergeant," Catherine said, "we have a mission." "I heard, Admiral," Marcus said. "We are going to save some aliens who think we are monsters." "We are going to save people who need help," Catherine corrected. "That is what matters." Marcus nodded slowly. "My squad is ready. We have been training for this our whole lives, even if we did not know it." Catherine moved through the ship, talking to more crew members. She found the same thing everywhere: determination, purpose. Nobody was forced to go. Every single person on these ships had volunteered when they heard about the mission. In the pilot briefing room, Commander Lisa Park was going over the tactical data with her squadron. "The Kreshkar bioships are alive," she explained. "They are tough but not indestructible. Our railguns should punch through them just fine. The problem is there are millions of them." "Millions?" asked one of the younger pilots. "How are we supposed to fight millions?" "The same way humans have always fought when outnumbered," Lisa said with a grim smile. "Smart, aggressive, and really, really angry that somebody thought they could push us around." Down in engineering, Chief Engineer Rodriguez was making final adjustments to the FTL drive. Human faster-than-light technology was different from what the aliens used. Theirs was elegant and efficient, gently bending space around their ships. Human drives were described by one alien scientist as ripping a hole in reality and diving through before the universe noticed. "How fast can we go, Chief?" Catherine asked. "Faster than we should," Rodriguez said. "I can push the drives to 120%. It will be rough, but we will get there in time." "Do it," Catherine ordered. 6 hours after receiving the distress call, the Terran Expeditionary Fleet was ready to depart. Catherine stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, looking at the Earth below. It was a beautiful blue and green marble, their home, a death world that had tried to kill humanity for millions of years and failed. "All ships report ready, Admiral," her tactical officer said. Catherine thought about the alien ambassador's message, about the children and families who were going to die, about the council species who had given up on violence but had never needed to learn what humanity knew. Sometimes violence was the answer. Not because it was pretty or noble, but because sometimes people needed protecting and monsters needed stopping. "Send a message to the Jolnari," Catherine said. "Tell them help is coming. Tell them to hold on just a little longer." "What else should we say, Admiral?" Catherine smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator that had spotted prey, the smile of a species from a death world that had never learned to back down. "Tell them the Death Worlders are coming, and we are really good at fighting." The fleet's FTL drives activated. Space tore open in 47 places. Reality screaming in protest as the human ships punched through and vanished. They left Earth behind and raced toward a war zone 200 light-years away. In the holds of those ships were 15,000 soldiers, pilots, and Marines. They came from every nation on Earth, every culture, every background. But they shared one thing: they were human. They were from a planet that had tried to kill them every day and failed. They had evolved to be tough, stubborn, and really hard to kill. The Kreshkar swarm had destroyed dozens of civilizations. They had consumed billions of lives. They had never lost a battle. They were about to learn what happened when they threatened a species that evolution had spent millions of years teaching how to fight back. The countdown continued. 3 cycles until Valora Prime fell. But now, racing through the darkness at impossible speeds, help was coming. The Terran Expeditionary Fleet tore back into normal space at the edge of the Valora system. The transition from faster-than-light travel was violent. Space rippled and screamed. Reality bent and snapped back. The human crews endured the rough crossing because they had built their ships tough and trained their bodies tougher. Admiral Catherine Morrison stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and immediately felt her stomach turn. Not from the FTL transition, from what she saw on the tactical display. "Dear God," whispered her tactical officer. The Valora system was dying. 2 of the outer planets showed as lifeless gray spheres on the sensors. Once they had been colony worlds with cities and farms. Now they were stripped to bare rock. Not a single living thing remained. Not a plant. Not a microbe, nothing. Around the 3rd planet, Valora Prime, space was filled with movement. Millions of contacts swarmed like insects around food. The Kreshkar swarm had arrived in force. "Give me visual," Catherine ordered. The main screen activated. What she saw made her hands clench into fists. The Kreshkar bioships looked like enormous insects crossed with deep-sea creatures. They were alive, covered in chitinous armor and pulsing with internal light. Some were small, maybe the size of a fighter jet. Others were massive, kilometers long, with tentacles that could wrap around entire ships. All of them moved with purpose, coordinated by the hive mind that controlled them. Between the swarm and the planet, a handful of Zelnari ships tried desperately to hold the line. Their vessels were beautiful, made of crystal and light. They were also being torn apart. As Catherine watched, one of the alien ships was swarmed by dozens of bioships. Acid sprayed across its hull. Claws ripped through the crystal structure. In seconds, it was nothing but debris. "Sensors. Report," Catherine said, forcing her voice to stay calm. "Counting approximately 4.2 million Kreshkar bioships in the system," the sensor officer said. "The Zelnari have 17 ships remaining. They are falling back to the planet. Estimate they have... Admiral, they have maybe 2 hours before the swarm breaks through completely." "We made it just in time then," Catherine said. She pressed the fleet-wide communication button. "All ships, this is Admiral Morrison. We came here to do a job. There are 2.3 billion people on that planet who need our help. The Council species said nobody could fight the swarm. Let us show them what humans can do. All ships weapons free. Formation Delta 7. Target the densest clusters first. Show these bugs what a death world breeds." The 47 ships of the Terran fleet accelerated toward the swarm. They moved fast, much faster than the Council species expected. Human ships could pull high-G maneuvers because human bodies could handle it. Evolution on a high-gravity world had made humanity denser, stronger, more resistant to the forces that would kill frailer species. "Range in 30 seconds, the tactical officer reported. "Targeting solutions locked." "All batteries," Catherine said. "Fire." The human fleet opened up with everything they had. Railguns fired first. These were not energy weapons or particle beams. They were simple kinetic weapons, using magnetic acceleration to fire chunks of tungsten at a significant fraction of light speed. When those slugs hit the Kreshkar bioships, they did not burn holes. They punched straight through, the kinetic energy turning living tissue into explosions of frozen biomass and shattered chitin. The first volley killed thousands of bioships in seconds. The Kreshkar swarm reacted immediately. The hive mind that controlled them was not stupid. It recognized a threat. Millions of bioships turned away from Valora Prime and rushed toward the human fleet. "Here they come," the tactical officer said unnecessarily. The sensor screen looked like a snowstorm of hostile contacts. "Missile pods, prepare to fire," Catherine ordered. "Make it count." The human destroyers and cruisers opened their missile bays. Hundreds of rockets launched, their engines burning bright in the darkness. These were not precision weapons. They were area denial munitions, each carrying multiple nuclear warheads designed to detonate in patterns. The first wave of Kreshkar bioships hit the missile field. Nuclear fire blossomed in space, silent explosions that vaporized everything within their radius. Tens of thousands of bioships died in those first moments, but millions remained. The swarm crashed into the human fleet like a tidal wave of teeth and claws. 3 human destroyers were immediately swarmed, their hulls covered in bioships trying to claw through the armor. HMS Defiant is reporting heavy damage, communications reported. They are covered in hostiles. Armor breaching on multiple decks. Catherine watched as the Defiant, a destroyer that had fought in the Mars Rebellion, disappeared under a mass of alien creatures. She could almost hear the sounds of claws scraping on metal, of acid eating through armor. Defiant, this is Morrison. Can you shake them? Negative, Admiral. The voice of Captain Rodriguez came through, calm despite the situation. We have tried everything. They are too many. They are eating through to engineering. Catherine made a decision. It was the kind of decision that would give her nightmares later, but it had to be made. Captain Rodriguez, do you have manual control of your reactor? There was a pause. Then Rodriguez laughed. It was a dark laugh, but genuine. I understand, Admiral. It has been an honor serving with you. The honor was mine, Captain. Give them hell. The Defiant stopped trying to escape. Instead, it accelerated directly into the thickest part of the swarm. More and more bioships attached to its hull, thinking they had killed it. The destroyer pushed deep into the swarm's center. Then its fusion reactor overloaded. The explosion was a miniature sun. Everything within 10 kilometers simply ceased to exist. The bioships on the Defiant's hull, the thousands of Kreshkar ships nearby, all of it turned to superheated plasma in an instant. The swarm faltered. For the first time in its thousands of years of existence, the hive mind felt something like confusion. The prey had destroyed itself to hurt the swarm. That was not normal behavior. Prey ran, prey hid. Prey did not turn around and bite back. Catherine forced herself to look away from the fading fireball where the Defiant had been. She would mourn later. Right now she had a battle to win. All fighters launch, she ordered. The Indomitable and the other carriers opened their bays. Hundreds of small craft poured out, piloted by humans who had trained their whole lives for this moment. The fighters were fast and agile, armed with plasma cannons and tactical missiles. Commander Lisa Park led her squadron into the swarm. The Kreshkar bioships were everywhere, but she had trained for this. She pulled maneuvers that would have killed an alien pilot, the G-forces pushing her down into her seat. Her targeting computer screamed warnings as bioships tried to track her. She ignored them and fired, her plasma cannons burning through alien chitin. Stay tight, she yelled to her squadron. Watch your six. They are trying to swarm us. One of her pilots, a young woman named Chen, was too slow. 3 bioships latched onto her fighter. She tried to shake them, but they were too strong. I am hit. I am hit. They are on my hull. Chen, eject! Lisa ordered. Negative. If I eject, they will eat me. I am taking them with me. Chen's fighter accelerated directly into a cluster of bioships and detonated its remaining missiles. The explosion took out dozens of the enemy. Lisa gritted her teeth and kept fighting. This was what war was. This was what the Council species did not understand. Sometimes good people died doing the right thing. Humanity had learned that lesson thousands of years ago, written in blood across countless battlefields. The battle raged for hours. The human ships fought with a ferocity the Kreshkar had never encountered. When their long-range weapons ran dry, they closed to point-blank range and used their close-in defense systems. When those ran out, they rammed. The cruiser Thunderchild, crippled in venting atmosphere, crashed directly into a Kreshkar megaship. The collision broke both vessels apart, but it created an opening that let 2 destroyers pour fire into a cluster of bioships behind it. Status report, Catherine demanded, 12 hours into the battle. We have lost 7 ships, her tactical officer said. Another 14 are heavily damaged. But Admiral, the officer's voice held something like awe. We have killed over 1.5 million Kreshkar bioships. The swarm is pulling back from Valora Prime. They are focusing everything on us. Catherine smiled grimly. Good, that is what we wanted. Keep them away from those civilians. On Valora Prime, Ambassador Veltrin watched the battle from the planet's surface. She could see the explosions in orbit, bright flashes against the darkness of space. The human ships were fighting with an intensity she had never imagined possible. The Gelnari defenders, their remaining ships battered but still functional, rallied beside the humans. They could not match the human firepower, but they could provide shields and targeting data. Who are they? One of the Gelnari captains asked in wonder. Who are these humans that fight like demons? They are from a death world, Veltrin said softly. A planet that tried to kill them for millions of years. They learned to fight back, and now they are fighting for us. In space, the tide of battle began to turn. The Kreshkar swarm was not used to prey that fought back this hard. The hive mind was ancient and experienced, but it had never faced persistence hunters before. It had never faced a species that refused to break. The human fleet kept fighting. When they ran low on ammunition, they adjusted tactics. When their weapons overheated, the battle in orbit was not over, but the Kreshkar had learned they could not simply overwhelm the human fleet. The swarm began to change tactics. If they could not win in space, they would win on the ground. Massive bioships, each one the size of a small building, began breaking away from the main swarm and diving toward Valora Prime. They were designed to carry invasion forces, living creatures bred specifically to attack ground targets and process organic life. "Admiral, the Kreshkar are landing ground forces," the tactical officer reported. "Dozens of landing ships. They are targeting population centers." Catherine Morrison felt her jaw tighten. She had expected this. The swarm always deployed ground forces once they broke through orbital defenses. It was how they processed entire planets. "What do the Jelnari have for ground defense?" she asked. "Minimal," the communications officer said, checking the data the aliens had provided. "They are a peaceful species. They have security forces for crowd control and emergency services, but nothing designed for warfare. The Kreshkar ground forces will tear through them in minutes." Catherine made her decision. "Launch the drop pods. All Marine units execute ground assault protocol. Show them what human soldiers can do." In the belly of the Indomitable and the other carriers, 3,000 Marines prepared for deployment. They wore powered armor, thick plates of composite material over mechanical exoskeletons that enhanced strength and speed. Each suit was painted in earth colors, greens and browns and grays. War colors. Sergeant Marcus Chen checked his squad one final time. He had 12 soldiers under his command, all veterans of various Earth conflicts. They had trained for years, but this would be their first combat against aliens. "Listen up," Marcus said. "The enemy on the ground are living weapons. They are big, they are fast, and they want to eat the civilians. Our job is simple. Get between the Kreshkar and the Jelnari. Hold the line. Do not let them through." "Understood?" "Understood, Sergeant," his squad shouted back. "Good, now get in your pods and remember your training. We are the Terran Marines. We are from Earth, we do not break." The drop pods were essentially armored coffins with rockets attached. They would launch from orbit, fall through the atmosphere protected by heat shields, and crash land near the combat zones. It was a brutal, dangerous method of deployment. It was also fast and put soldiers exactly where they needed to be. Marcus climbed into his pod and sealed it shut. The interior was cramped, barely larger than his armored body. He could hear his own breathing inside the helmet. The pod systems came online, displays showing his trajectory and landing zone. "All pods ready for launch," came the voice of the drop master over the radio. "Launching in 3, 2, 1, drop." Marcus felt the sudden kick as his pod launched from the ship. Then he was falling, accelerating toward the planet below. The pod shook and rattled. Warning lights flashed. The heat shield glowed cherry red as it hit the atmosphere. This was what separated humans from most council species. Other aliens would never willingly fall from orbit in a metal box and trust that they would survive. Humans did it regularly, just another way that evolution on a death world had made them crazy enough to try anything. The pod's retro rockets fired at the last second, slowing the descent just enough. Then it hit the ground with a massive impact. Marcus felt his teeth rattle despite the shock absorption system. The pod's doors blew off with explosive charges. He stepped out into chaos. The landing zone was in what had been a beautiful city of crystal towers and hanging gardens. Now it was a war zone. Buildings were on fire. Jelnari civilians were running, screaming in panic. And everywhere there were Kreshkar. The ground forces looked nothing like the bioships. These were massive creatures, each one 3 meters tall and covered in razor-sharp chitin. They had too many legs, too many eyes, and mouths full of teeth designed to rend and tear. They moved fast, scuttling across the ground and up walls with terrible speed. Marcus raised his rifle and fired. The armor-piercing rounds punched through the Kreshkar's shell and it collapsed, twitching. Around him, his squad emerged from their pods and immediately engaged the enemy. "Form a perimeter," Marcus ordered. "Civilians to the rear. Anything that tries to get through us, you kill it." The Kreshkar noticed the humans and charged. They were used to prey that ran. They were not ready for prey that stood its ground and shot back. The human Marines opened fire with everything they had. Rifles, grenades, plasma charges. The sound was deafening. The creche car kept coming, driven by the hive mind to attack and consume. One of the creatures broke through the initial line and charged directly at Marcus. He stood his ground, firing his rifle until it clicked empty. The creche car was still coming. Marcus dropped the rifle and pulled out his combat knife, a monomolecular blade sharp enough to cut through almost anything. The creature leaped at him. Marcus sidestepped with the enhanced speed his armor gave him, and drove the knife up into what he hoped was a vital spot. The blade went in deep. The creche car screeched and thrashed, but Marcus held on, twisting the knife until the creature stopped moving. He pulled the knife out and immediately engaged another target. There was no time to think, no time to be afraid. This was what he had trained for. This was what humans did. Behind the marine line, Gelnari civilians huddled together. They watched in amazement as the human soldiers fought creatures that would have killed them in seconds. The humans were so small compared to the creche car, and yet they were winning. "Fall back to checkpoint Delta," Marcus ordered. "We need to get these civilians to the evacuation shuttles." His squad began a fighting retreat, maintaining their formation as they moved. Every time a creche car got close, they killed it. Every time the line started to buckle, they adjusted and held. Other Marine units were scattered across the city, each one holding a defensive position. Some guarded evacuation points. Others protected hospitals and schools. A few were deep behind enemy lines, setting up ambushes and destroying creche car landing ships before they could deploy more forces. Lieutenant Sarah, Kim's squad, had drawn one of the hardest assignments, defending a civilian shelter that held over 10,000 Gelnari refugees. The shelter was built into a hillside with only one entrance. The creche car were swarming toward it, drawn by the concentration of life inside. "They really want in," said Private Johnson, firing controlled bursts from his position. "They keep coming no matter how many we kill." "Then we keep killing them," Sarah said simply. "Set up the claymores. When they get close, we blow them back. Grenades on my mark. Make every shot count." The creche car charged in a wave, hundreds of them rushing toward the shelter entrance. The Marines waited until the last possible second. "Now," Sarah yelled. The claymore mines detonated, shredding the first wave of creche car. Grenades flew through the air and exploded. The Marines poured fire into the mass of alien bodies. The creche car kept coming, climbing over their own dead to reach the humans. One of Sarah's soldiers went down, his armor breached by creche car claws. Two more Marines immediately pulled him back while others filled the gap in the line. That was how humans fought. They protected each other. They never left anyone behind. "Armor breach on Sector 3, someone shouted. "Patch it! Keep fighting!" Hours passed. The Marines fought without pause, their ammunition running low, their armor damaged and leaking. But they held. They always held. Marcus Chen's squad had been fighting for 6 straight hours when they finally reached an evacuation shuttle. Gelnari civilians rushed aboard, crying with relief. Marcus counted them as they passed, making sure every single one got on the shuttle safely. His armor was covered in alien blood and his own. A creche car had gotten through his defenses earlier and torn a gash in his side. The armor's medical systems had sealed the wound and pumped him full of painkillers, but he could feel the damage. "Sergeant, that is the last of them," said Corporal Davis. "We need to get on that shuttle." "Not yet," Marcus said. "There might be more civilians. We sweep the area one more time. Sergeant, you are bleeding. I will bleed later. Right now we have a job to do." They found 3 more Gelnari hiding in a collapsed building, too scared to move. Marcus personally carried 2 of them to the shuttle, his armor's servos straining under the weight. When the last civilian was aboard, he finally allowed himself to get on. As the shuttle lifted off, Marcus looked down at the city below. It was scarred and burning, but it was still there. The creche car had not won. The civilians had been saved. Across the planet, similar scenes were playing out. Human Marines held the line in 100 different places. Some positions were overrun. Some squads were completely wiped out. But every single Marine fought until their last breath, buying time for the Gelnari to evacuate. The creche car hive mind was experiencing something it had never felt before: uncertainty. These humans were supposed to be easy prey, small, soft, fragile. Instead, they fought with a ferocity that matched the swarm's own. They refused to break. They refused to run. Even when they were wounded, they kept fighting. In one engagement, a single human Marine, his armor destroyed and his body broken, managed to rig a Kreshkar landing ship with explosives. He detonated them manually, destroying the SC. The battle for Valora Prime was over. The Kreshkar swarm, for the first time in its thousands of years of existence, had retreated. The bioships fled the system, leaving behind millions of their dead floating in the darkness of space. The hive mind had learned a lesson written in fire and blood. Humanity was not prey, Admiral Catherine. Morrison stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and watched as recovery teams searched for survivors among the wreckage. 7 human ships had been destroyed completely. Another 14 were so badly damaged they would need to be towed back to Earth. Of the 15,000 humans who had come to Valora Prime, 2,847 would never go home. Catherine felt every single loss like a weight on her chest. She knew their names. She had read their files. They had been teachers and farmers and engineers who had volunteered to become soldiers because someone needed help. Now they were gone, but 2.3 billion Gelnari were alive because of them. On the surface of Valora Prime, Sergeant Marcus Chen sat outside a medical tent, his side bandaged and his armor piled nearby. Around him, other Marines rested, some sleeping, others staring at nothing. They were alive. So many of their brothers and sisters were not. A Gelnari child approached cautiously. She was small, with shimmering skin that cycled through nervous colors. She held something in her hands, a flower that grew on her world, pale blue with silver edges. "Thank you," she said in halting English, the translation device on her collar helping. "You saved my family. You saved everyone." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached out and gently took the flower. "You are welcome, kid. That is what we do." The child's colors shifted to something bright and happy. She ran back to her family who stood nearby watching. They bowed to Marcus, a gesture of deep respect in their culture. All across the planet, similar scenes were playing out. Gelnari civilians approached human soldiers with gifts, with thanks, with tears. They had watched these strange aliens fight like demons to protect them. They had seen humans die rather than let the Kreshkar through. Ambassador Veltrin walked through the ruins of her planet's capital city. Buildings were collapsed, gardens were burned, but her people were alive. She found Admiral Morrison inspecting a damaged human destroyer that had made an emergency landing. "Admiral," Veltrin said. Her colors were complex, shifting through emotions that her species rarely felt all at once. Grief, gratitude, shame, hope. Catherine turned to face her. The Admiral looked exhausted, her uniform dirty and her eyes red from lack of sleep. "Ambassador," Catherine said, "your people are safe. The evacuation is nearly complete. We can help you rebuild." "Why?" Veltrin asked. The question came out raw, filled with genuine confusion. "Why did you help us?" "We are strangers. The Council told you to stay away. We called your species dangerous." "Why did you come?" Catherine was quiet for a moment. Then she said simply, "Because you asked. Because you needed help. Because we could. Is there supposed to be another reason?" Veltrin felt something break inside her. It was not a bad feeling. It was like a wall coming down, letting in light. She stepped forward and did something Gelnari rarely did with other species. She reached out and touched Catherine's hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for teaching us that strength and compassion are not opposites. Thank you for showing us that people from a death world can be the kindest of all." News of the battle spread across the galaxy at light speed, carried by automated communication systems and merchant ships. The footage was incredible. Human vessels fighting against impossible odds, Marines holding the line against creatures twice their size, ships sacrificing themselves to protect civilians they had never met. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The massive chamber was filled with agitated representatives all talking at once. High Chancellor Morden called for order, his eye stalks waving frantically. "The humans have done what should have been impossible," Councillor Zextari said, their geometric shapes spinning rapidly. "They defeated the Kreshkar swarm. A force that has consumed dozens of civilizations was driven away by a single fleet. They lost nearly 3,000 soldiers," another councillor pointed out. "That is a catastrophic casualty rate, and yet they saved 2.3 billion Gelnari," Veltrin said. She had been invited to address the council directly. They did not count the cost. They did not negotiate payment. They did not ask what they would receive. They simply came when we called. Can any of you say the same? The council chamber fell silent. The truth of her words was undeniable. The humans are dangerous, Mordan said slowly. That much is proven. But perhaps we have been thinking about danger in the wrong way. What do you mean? Asked Whisper through Void. We quarantined them because we feared they would harm us, Morden said. But what if their capacity for violence is what makes them valuable? What if the galaxy needs Deathworlders to protect the rest of us from threats we cannot face? The debate raged for hours. Some counselors argued that humanity was too unpredictable, too aggressive. Others pointed out that the Kreshkar would have destroyed the Jelnari, if not for human intervention. What would happen the next time a violent species threatened peaceful worlds? Finally, Ambassador Chen of Earth was allowed to address the council. She stood in the center of the chamber, representing all of humanity. Honored counselors, she began, you have spent much time debating what kind of species we are. Let me tell you, we are humans. We come from a world that tried to kill us every single day for millions of years. We learned to be tough. We learned to be stubborn. We learned to fight back. But we also learned something else. She paused, looking around at all the alien species watching her. We learned to protect each other. On our world, in our tribes and families and nations, we survived by working together, by defending those who could not defend themselves. Yes, we have had wars, terrible, bloody wars, but we also have heroes who run into burning buildings to save strangers, soldiers who throw themselves on grenades to protect their friends, parents who would die for their children without hesitation. You see Deathworlders, Chen continued. You see dangerous, violent beings. We see ourselves as survivors, as protectors. Yes, we can fight, but we fight for something. We fight for people who need help. We fight because sometimes violence is the only answer to violence. The Kreshkar do not negotiate. They do not compromise, they eat. If you want to stop them, you have to fight them. She took a deep breath. The Galactic Council has spent 50,000 years evolving beyond violence. That is beautiful. That is admirable. But it only works if everyone evolves with you. The Kreshkar did not evolve. They are still predators. And predators only understand one thing, a prey that bites back. The council voted the next day. It was not unanimous, but it was decisive. The quarantine on Earth was lifted. Humanity was offered a seat on the Galactic Council, not as observers or junior members, but as full partners. More than that, Earth was offered a new role, protector species. When threats arose that the peaceful council species could not handle, humanity would be called. In return, Earth would receive access to alien technology, trade opportunities, and a voice in galactic affairs. The Terran Expeditionary Fleet returned to Earth 3 weeks after the battle. They came home not in triumph but in somber pride. Catherine Morrison stood on the bridge as the fleet entered the Sol system and saw Earth ahead, that beautiful blue marble. Home, she said softly. The ships were met by a fleet of support vessels and shuttles. The wounded were taken to hospitals. The dead were taken to their families. Memorial services were held across the planet, honoring those who had died saving aliens they had never met. Marcus Chen attended the funeral for the members of his squad who had not made it back. He stood in his dress uniform, medals gleaming on his chest, and watched as the honor guard folded the Earth flag and presented it to the families. He had done this too many times. Each time hurt just as much, but he also received letters. Thousands of them. From Zelnari families who wanted to thank him, from children who were alive because he had stood between them and the Kreshkar, from parents who still had their kids because a human they never met decided their lives were worth protecting. Marcus kept every single letter. On nights when the memories were bad, when he dreamed of the battle, he would read them and remember why it had been worth it. On Valora Prime, the Jelnari began to rebuild. But they also built something new, a monument. It stood in the center of their capital city, made of the same crystal they used for their most sacred structures. The monument showed a human marine, standing in full armor, weapon held ready, looking out as if watching for threats. Around the base were carved the names of every human who had died protecting their world. Above it, in letters that glowed with internal light, were words in both English and Jelnari. Here stood the Deathworlders. When we called for help, they answered. When we needed protection, they fought. When we faced extinction, they said no. Let all who see this remember, the strength to fight is meaningless without the compassion to protect. These beings from Earth taught us that true warriors are not those who love war, but those who are willing to fight so others do not have to. the monument became famous across the galaxy. Species that had never heard of Earth suddenly